introducing our attorney this evening. I had a call from him. And Mr. Mannix. I don't think Mr. Coffey will be making. No one signed in to make comments this evening, so we're going to roll along. Good to see so many students here. Welcome. If you need something signed and we're still rolling on, you need to leave. As long as you're here 1 hour, we'll be glad to sign that for
What
you.
do you mean my $3 rule isn't going to be in effect? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Okay.
that's for the A. 1 hour's past fair. We have a rather lengthy agenda this evening. Of course, how long we'll spend discussing any of the topics is always an unknown. I'm just going to work the agenda down through. First of all, vacancy.
That's an alternate, right?
These are
That's a
alternates,
vacancy.
yes.
Vacancy.
Vacancy in the planning board alternates. We had a couple names that we threw out. One of the individuals has indicated they would be willing. The other hasn't responded yet, and I just wanted to put that on the agenda. It helps us in the office to make sure we don't lose track of this, and gives me a chance to also remind everyone, if you have any suggestions, recommendations, please let us know. It's about what that boils down to. Soon, hopefully, we will be able to have a couple of names for you. Fiscal stress monitoring. I gave you a packet of information on that. Obviously, if you go to the website, you'll find more, but I found some of the attached information helpful because it explained, there were some definitions in there. I still have to pay close attention sometimes because the language of the auditor, the financial manager is a little different than Joe Homeowner and balancing your checkbook, just a little different terminology. The good news, and somewhere in that packet toward the back, I believe,
Good chart on the fiscal stress.
there's some good charts on the back, and
Looks like we came out pretty good on that.
well, we did. And if you see about the third, fourth page from the bottom, there's one that shows a graph of where we were in 2012. In 2012, we were in fine shape. Certainly a lot of municipalities would have liked to have been there. But we were a little closer to fiscal stress susceptible, first layer of concern that I wanted to be. We dropped drastically in 2013 and dropped again next year. I found their projecting into 2015 a bit interesting. And I guess, if you look at the 3 years of data, it would be logical to project. I was sharing earlier, Mr. Collins shared a compilation that he did of the town, the city, Beekman Town, and Schuyler Falls. And some of the data, there's just tons of data there. You could get lost in the site. And it was interesting. There were some surprises for me, but the devil is in the details. And what's going on in that municipality at that particular time? If they had special bond issues, if that was the year that they dropped debt, you all know in 2017 we have a number of bonds that are going to drop off, but we also all know because of the water tanks and some other infrastructure issues, we're going to replace them with some new stuff. You have to do that. If it's a year when you had things go wrong, you had to replace the furnace, snowplow truck was unable to be repaired, then again, it changes those numbers. It's going to take a few years of data, but certainly I think everyone at the town could be commended for driving us the right direction. Environmental indicators, I don't like to interpret things for people. You got the data, you're smart, you can read and understand. But generally, to me, environmental indicators, what I've been told and learned, there's not much we can do about that. They're factors that can drive some of the other issues, but there's not a lot we can do about changing population, change the median age, and so on and so forth. But those are factors. And for certain communities, those are factors that cause them great fiscal stress. This is something, as you may be aware, the comptroller started. following the tax cap. There was a lot of concern that some municipalities, some schools, some fire departments were spending their reserves. They were delaying working on certain projects that were important. They were borrowing money that they weren't in good position to be repaying long-term. And the issue of solvency, sustainability, we threw that word around a lot a couple years ago, became very important to him. And I'm glad he did this, because there's a second side to the coin. You know, if nobody does anything, you can probably look like your numbers are pretty good for the community. But we have a responsibility, not only one to taxpayers and finances, but also to assure that when you turn the faucet, the water comes out, that the roads are safe for commuters and for business and so on and so forth. So the fiscal stress monitoring, I think, is a really important factor, but it's one of the factors. I don't know if anyone had any comments or anything further you wanted to say about that?
Well, I just thought that compared to other towns, all towns in the state, compared to other North Country towns, and compared to large upstate towns, we're looking as good or better, actually. At least off the charts that I looked at.
The numbers look good. Again, you know, eye of the beholder, and you can't interpret, but
Well, we know we still have a lot of things to handle.
that's a lot of problem. And this year, not problem. That's a lot of the issue we've got to give serious thought to, because this year we gathered a lot of data, we positioned ourselves, we listened to proposals. We've got to pull the trigger on those water towers. Meg, I know you got very close, you had time to get involved in a lot of those meetings. You can't just let it go. Over my 10 years, we've done a little less paving than we used to in the past. We do a lot more shimming and maintenance because of the cost of paving. You can't fall behind. Catch-up is more expensive, and the cost of materials isn't cheaper as you go forward. But it was also the comptroller's office that did a webinar talking about overriding the cap. When you do it, how you do it, why you do it, that that should be an event, not a process, because you had fiscal needs and then you go back under and you continue there as much as you can. But I think you're right, Tom. If you look at the comparisons, we're certainly in a better position than many. And that's what that data is there for. Anyone else? Emergency and fire plan policy updates. I've been on a roll with some policy updates as we work through this year. This, I think, is the last one. Wanted you to simply have this, look at this. This was done in collaboration with Art, with his fire chief hat on, as well as his safety coordinator hat, building grounds, etc. This is done comparable to other plans. One of the big pieces I wasn't comfortable with was our record keeping, to log the drills, etc.
But we need one this year, it looks like.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So let me know if you have any questions. Also, contact Art Grove if you have any. You may have even better answers. I would propose that we have a resolution next Monday to adopt this revised policy and procedure. The next item, water rate letters. I put this in the agenda as a awareness. These letters went out to both Scholar Falls and Beekmantown. You'll notice the rates are the same. It's a discussion we've had for some time, and you'll notice the rates are a little more than resident users.
It wasn't need for a change?
I believe this is a change over last year. I don't have last year's numbers.
I thought you said it was the same, so.
Oh, the two of them are the same.
Oh, yeah, right.
Unfortunately, we had outside users that didn't have comparable rates.
I thought it was a
So
little higher.
we've gradually, as the agreements terminate, been trying to bring them into alignment with each other. But just in case you had a question on the street, that's going out. My other item was just a reminder, we have our public budget work sessions on the 13th, 14th, 15th. We haven't specifically gotten to schedule those yet with departments, but they will run between 2 and 6 p.m. And that sort of goes along with number 6. Again, just a reminder to everyone, to us, that the tentative budget is due to the clerk by 9:30. I'm more than confident we will have it by then. 7 is a little bit of a reminder. The only individual from the board who is not joining us on the Schluter tour is Mr. Mannix, and Mr. Coffey is also, and Mr. Collins down to join us for that. So just a reminder to everyone that, as far as I know, it's still on for 10:30. Then we get to something a little more challenging. The letter from the Katyville Fire District, Tom Gordon, concerning the bridge.
It's already got mounds of dirt and everything, so you can't drive a vehicle through there very easily.
Very easily is the operative word, and that's some of the concern. If you didn't have the bridge.
But if you put a lock, like they want a lockable barrier, that isn't gonna keep people out with bicycles or with walking either.
Well, and they want the bridge removed.
Is that, I understand that, but when we're talking about the Saranac River Trail, has the study shown anything about where it might cross and what, you know, if that's one of the areas that you might need a bridge?
I think it is.
In which case, you take it out and build a new one, or you use what's there?
If
We're
you,
talking about a
Yep.
walking trail, we're not talking about cars and vehicles. So it seems to me that it would be safe for that. I mean, obviously, we gotta get an engineer to look at it, but to build a new one would be costly, I think.
be very costly.
So to me, it seems as if, since that's part of our long range plan in terms of the Saranac River Trail and the recreation, it might, I don't mind if we wanna put the barriers there now, lockable barriers and stuff, so cars can't get to it, so they have to go further if they're gonna go over there to swim or jump off the bridge or whatever, but it would seem to me that it wouldn't be a good thing to take the thing down now.
And if we took it down, would that stop anyone from jumping off
No.
cliffs?
No, because that's where everybody jumps off.
I mean, it's, I spoke with them about this, Tom, and I certainly, and I think everyone here would do anything we could to try to prevent another tragedy from happening. But it's hard for us to prevent bad decision-making, and clearly that is. I also sent the letter to representatives that I've worked with at NYSEG. And I did that on Monday the 21st, letting them know this was going to be coming to a work session, and that I would appreciate some feedback prior to tonight, because NYSEG certainly plays a big role in this. I haven't heard anything from them. Obviously, I will follow up at some point, but I was curious to hear what they had to say with the request.
Well, obviously, you know, it's a tragedy every time someone dies there,
It's terrible.
and we do want it to happen, but you can't stop everybody from doing what they sometimes want to do. Yep, we've got warning signs, we've had warning signs, we've had the bridge blocked. I don't know that taking down the bridge is gonna lessen the problem.
It doesn't seem like that's what they're asking.
You know, we have one at lockable
That's
barricades on
also
the
a
boats.
that's also, you know, desired, but this improving the barriers to prevent people, it seems like the, you know, first effort to try and control that. But we need to get some feedback from NICEAG, and I haven't had any on that part. As you can see, they've also copied this letter to a bunch of other individuals and agencies. None of them have contacted me.
I'd be curious to hear what the county has to say about it.
Is it more accessible from one side or the other?
No.
I don't think so.
I've been out there, I've walked through there. I was looking at what could be a possible trail for the Saranac River Trail, and I walked the length of that, from Scholar Falls side all the way over. It's the same on both sides. You get over a big mound of earth to get, and then you walk across and go over another big mound of earth. Can't see, I mean, obviously, it's not people driving off there that's causing a problem anyway. I understand where they're coming from,
Yeah.
and certainly agree that we wanna try to prevent any more tragedies there, but I don't even know if the lockable barriers are gonna keep people from going there.
People wanna get somewhere, they're usually gonna find a way to get
That's always been a partying place back there for the last 40 years.
Since when has it not?
No, I know, that's what I'm saying, it's for the last 40 years it's been.
Well, I've been around longer than that, it was still, it was used back, it was used many years before that.
Yeah, well,
I will keep you abreast of what I hear back from NICEAG. I'm just gonna have to follow up with them. You know, if there's something more we can do to make it more difficult for them to get there, if it's doable, I don't think anybody would argue, but
Well, if you hear anything from the others, you can let us know.
I will let you know. I'll keep you abreast. Next item is the Life Flight. You received that letter. We've been supporting that program for a number of years. They have never asked for more, and we have never given more.
So it's still the same,
We would propose to keep it the same, correct?
1,500?
Yep, they've never asked for a change that I'm aware of.
Well, I've always been in favor of that. I think it's necessary, and we need to contribute towards that for the community.
I would agree. Nobody's arguing, so that'll go forward. My number 10 is a request to backfill a position in the Highway Department. You have a letter from Mr. Woods. I'm sure you've had a chance to read it. If anyone has any comments, anyone from the Highway Committee?
I think Tom and I would both agree that Jim really needs this position filled sooner rather than later. We've had some lengthy conversations.
The department dropped one person from, one position from the payroll over the last couple of years. There's less people working there anyway. He's had people sick, he's brought in temps to handle it in that situation. But in this case, he's filling a position where somebody just resigned, and that needs to be filled, and it's necessary to get the work done that needs to be done. And I think we need to approve this as quickly as possible.
And Mr. Barnaby has worked with him, he noted, in the department on and off, I believe, from December of 2014. So he has experience with plowing, et cetera.
So, and he's already been cleared by civil service, so there isn't any drawbacks to it.
You have a draft resolution in the packet that we have put a number on. In anticipation of this, if you would like, we can bring this to the floor tonight. Now's as good a time as any, probably.
I'd like us to entertain that.
Are there any amendments that anyone would like to make prior?
Tom has one, right?
Yeah, we'd like to change the second resolve in the first sentence there to effective as soon as possible, instead of first full pay period following. So
Because he's
approval.
already-
Civil service has already approved it.
Mhm.
When the fellow's available, we need him, so as soon as he's available. Obviously, he needs to give notice to his present job,
Right.
so it won't be immediately.
Rick, do you see where that is?
Yep.
The first full pay period will change to as soon as possible. Okay, so resolution 194, appointment of Larry Barnaby to MEO2 in the Highway Department.
Whereas a vacancy exists for a position of MEO2 in the Highway Department, and whereas Larry Barnaby has been employed as a seasonal help in the Highway Department since December 2014. Whereas James Wood, Highway Superintendent, recommends Mr. Barnaby for the existing vacant MEO2 position. Therefore be resolved that the Town Board, Town of Plattsburgh, does hereby authorize the appointment of Mr. Larry Barnaby to fill the vacant position of MEO2 as indicated by the current negotiation pay scale. And it be further resolved that this appointment will become effective as soon as possible following civil service approval, and the supervisor is hereby authorized to assign all necessary documents for the appointment of Mr. Barnaby to this position of MEO2 in the Highway Department with a probationary period of 52 weeks. And it be further resolved that a copy of this resolution be given to the finance manager, one to Mr. James Wood, Highway Superintendent, and that a certified copy be forwarded to Larry Barnaby and the Clinton County Department of Personnel of Civil Service final approval and filing.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Woods, second Mr. Cashman. Any discussion? Roll call.
Thomas Wood,
Yes.
Michael Cashman,
Yes.
Mike LeBev,
Yes.
and Bernie Bassett.
Yes, resolution carries. I think I anticipated more comments or questions on the earlier items.
Trying to get out of here in an hour.
That
like you
works,
wanted, you know.
that works for me. That takes us down to number 11. That, again, is just note that we are, I asked last week for department heads to get a list of surplus equipment to me. We've talked about this a couple of times over the last few months. We've got stuff. If we're gonna do that, we want to get that out there before the weather is, you know, nasty for people to go around, look at what it is we have, et cetera, et cetera. So, if I get things in time that we can pull it together, we may have it as soon as Monday, so we get the schedule. If not, it'll take longer, unfortunately. But be on the lookout for that. Could be as soon as Monday, if we get the information. Number 12 is kind of an interesting item. I initially had thought this evening we would talk about an intermunicipal water supply feasibility study. Over the last roughly, I'll say 3 months, the city and the town have been discussing water, issues of mutual concern relative to water supply. The mayor first came to me to share their need to address improvements to the dams in the reservoir in the town, which was going to be very, very expensive. We talked about that, what their options were. We also talked about our search for water. And as you know, we've got a test well we've been developing off the Tom Miller Road. Our supply needs to be increased. I've had a lot of concerns, I've mentioned often since the Comfort Inn fire. It took an enormous amount of water. Through the SCADA system, we could see the level in our tanks, and it was one thing to see how low it got, but it was another thing to see how long it took to raise it back up. And if you have a significant use during the summer and you have a dry spell, you got a perfect storm coming. I've often talked about where we could have valves to interconnect water supplies. If we have a major fire like that, could we use a different supply rather than reduce our water levels in the water tanks? The mayor came back another day with his Public Works engineer, John Ruff, and Scott Stoddard joined us at the table. And we just continued to talk about their needs, our needs, where the lines are so close. How could we collaborate? We got to a point where we brought in our consulting engineer, R.J. LaBerge, and said, listen to some of the things we're talking about. Obviously, they've had experiences with other municipalities, with similar issues, what worked, what didn't work, what are some of the speed bumps. We then had, we continued to see that there were some things we might be able to do collaboratively better, saving everybody money. Obviously, when you get into those things, it's okay, who's saving the most? You know, are you gonna save more than me? Is it gonna cost you more than me? Are we gonna have winners and losers? And you know, we always like to say it's a win-win situation, but there aren't too many times the win is 100% equal. Maybe you borrowed a cup of sugar and I borrowed a cup of flour. Well, sugar and flour, 100%, you know, whatever. The only way to resolve that would be to ideally get a third party to study it. And RJ did a draft, we reviewed that, then we asked a member of our water committee, and it was Meg in this instance, and the city did the same, and that was Becky Casper. And we met one more time to kind of go through where we were with that expanding group. And what we came up with is a plan that you had attached this evening. My initial goal and thought was we had I would say final draft, but it was still a draft, that we might collaboratively bless that and then jointly bring it to our boards through a work session or something to further discuss it. I learned Friday the city already passed it. So I guess here we are. They thought it was a good idea. I think it's a good idea as well. So it's in my number 12 as an item to discuss, but I've also got for you a draft resolution, and I really don't want us to pass this, to act on this, until next Monday. I think it's something that we should do in our regular session. And you haven't had the time to provide input, to discuss it, to weigh in on it, and you need that time. There's a resolution, but more importantly is the attached proposal for professional services that the city would propose we split the cost on.
Is it different from the one that we got?
Look at show me the last page. No.
It's the same?
Yes, the last page of the proposal was the last thing, last changes that were made after we met with committee members, board members. So the one that you got earlier is the same as the one you've got right now in the resolution. One of the things that was brought in the last discussion was trying to get some benchmark dates to try to be more specific with how the study would go. There are a number of items covered in there, such as identifying existing capital needs. And there's a list of things, brainstormed items that the town and city each came up with. We would then identify capital improvements required to implement, operational considerations, operational agreements would be needed, legal considerations. And there was a strong recommendation because of the intermunicipal nature and everything that goes with that, everything from insurance issues, union issues, et cetera, that there should be expert legal advice, reviewing the various rate structures, if we commingle water and their water is more expensive than ours, and how does that play into as well as coming up with some recommendations and so on. The ultimate end goal would be a final report, and you have some benchmark dates. The dates are really important. I can't imagine that this study wouldn't generate things we could do. It may generate 5 things the city can do and 2 the town can do. I don't know. But anything that either of us would propose to do is going to cost money. The date for a final report is driven such that there would be time for us to receive that, to review that, to study that, and to act on that, to seek funding through the current consolidated process to provide the resources to implement. There's nothing more frustrating than finding out what you could and should do, and then you can't do it because you don't have the money for it. Efficiencies are really what we're looking for, how taxpayers in each municipality can save money. Simple things like redundancy, that could be a huge improvement for us, as well as water source. What the city might do with their reservoir is a huge item for them. And we talked, I think it might be Meg, you brought up, as we go into this bigger move and maybe changing and improving systems, there are even now, you know more about it than I do, turbines that we can put in the water lines to help generate electricity, right? And that would all need to be looked at, I think. So, unless I hear otherwise, I would have this draft resolution in the agenda for Monday.
Does the, in terms of what we received on the report, for professional services, they recommended that we have this legal service,
Right.
but that is not included in this fee, as I understand.
Correct.
So are we committing to that by passing this too?
Well, by passing this, you're acknowledging that the proposal makes that recommendation. Any agreement you choose with an outside source, legal representation, would be a separate contract. Now, again, there may be issues that surface where the city's need for legal counsel exceeds the towns. There may be common interest.
Well, I understand, there is, so that would be something that we would be discussing at another time.
Correct.
In terms of the legal services.
He just, we discussed that a bit with RJ, and he just really wanted to make sure that the city and the town both acknowledge they aren't a legal reference when you begin to deal with intermunicipal agreements. That you would need that reviewed and recommended or approved by council.
Is it something our council can do?
We don't know because we don't know what the "it" is. There are certain things certainly he's capable of.
Right.
Legalities dealing with making something up. Our union workers working in the city, their union workers working in the town, I don't know. I mean, you can't put a number on it because depending what the outcomes of the study are, there may be no need. Or we may surface a functional intermunicipal consolidation of the system. That's huge. You better get very expert legal advice. So it's going to depend on the outcomes. But I think it was wise to put there because it's an acknowledgement that what you don't want to do is get toward the end and you discover you need legal service, and I didn't know that.
No, I just didn't want to be
But there's no
committed
number.
that we're actually contracting with this particular
No, that's a recommendation.
suggested firm.
Right, no, that's a
without having a
recommendation.
chance to look at it.
Yep, just a recommendation. It's a giant step in the sharing of services. It's a lot different than letting somebody borrow a shovel. We're actually looking at a major part of our infrastructure, our water system.
We do a lot of sharing of our services already.
We sure do.
Doesn't really come across our table very often. So the laborers have really good working relationships with one another with the city. being brought up to this level.
The very first time I noticed that is when I had a meeting of all department heads with Mayor Dan Stewart. And we sat around an extension of these tables, and it was amazing how well the department heads communicated. They were used to collaborating and talking, and how little the mayor and the supervisor really was aware of what they do.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, at that time, I think some of that was out of fear that somebody would find out how well they worked together in the field. Because it may not be allowed politically, and it may not be allowed for other reasons. But you're absolutely right, the guys do work well together. Our highway departments, and you all know, our highway department has intermunicipal agreements with other towns. We haven't approached that with the city. And in the situation with water, we need to.
and this is something kind of a little bit out there, but APG Euros, right
Mhm.
across the street from us, they manufacture huge blowers for water systems. So it's not even known if that's something we might need, but how cool would it be if we did? Maybe that's something we got it right here
Right from
from our
next door.
neighbor.
The product goes all over the country.
We're gonna go tour that, right?
I'm glad we're holding off on this though, because we would have normally had our committee meeting last week, but Scott was home with a sick little boy, so
Mhm.
we're gonna meet tomorrow.
Oh, good,
So we haven't really had a chance to go over
Good.
this stuff.
good. Any other thoughts, comments on what you've seen, heard? All right, well, we could have some expectation, we will see that again. And I'll be anxious to hear what the committee has to say, please let me know. Draft resolutions, of course, you have the minutes.
Just wanted to check with you on resolution 184. Did we get the numbers resolved on that were different from
Yeah, the number was right.
the county? Ours was right?
Ours was right, what we had was correct. Yep.
So the county and the town actually have different numbers for parcel.
The instrument that was filed is not the number that we were referencing,
Okay.
okay? It was really confusing because it had the same title, but it isn't the number that we referenced. But we did check
So
on that.
our resolution was correct with the numbers up?
Correct, it was.
Oh, there's anything else I got on the minutes of that?
We have a tentative budget filing draft for you, that should happen. The life flight agreement, as we discussed earlier. We already did the request to hire. We will have an emergency action for the fire procedures. That one didn't make the agenda, and the water agreement, which could be revised, let me know.
Rick, did we already file the thing for the meetings for
One
the
big,
budget? So,
well,
okay, so it's well within the
it will
time?
be on Wednesday, on the thing, then I'll send it to.
Okay.
to the press.
Very good. I've got another item, maybe we better do that now anyway. We still have not finalized a labor agreement. Cover page says policy for our full-time non-union employees. I don't know if you have a draft of that with you. I have two that needed to be updated, if anyone wants one in front of them at the moment. Whoops, sorry. There is a section in there that I've changed concerning the department head 20-year versus 10-year. We need to take some action. For the record, I will note a couple things. One is, what we would propose is to have a single document for the full-time non-union employees, with the exception of management confidential, which would be the finance manager and the secretary to the supervisor. We don't have an agreement For those two, it would basically be the same, but they would not be in that same cluster. That is a change. We added in definitions, number 9, what a full-time employee was. I think that was different. Number 19 in definitions, we noted exclusive of lunch, as is number 20 in the work week, exclusive of lunch. Small housekeeping items, but nonetheless important. In the preamble, we've got that the salaried and hourly employees noted within this document because it's a combined document. Under, this is a year two. Last year, we decided that in 2015, the salaries for the non-union employees would be raised by 2%, with the exception of certain elected officials. This one would propose the second year of this, which is 2016. Keep in mind, in about 3 months, you should begin some posturing for some discussions for another agreement. Maybe not quite that soon, get into the year of it. At 2 1/4, this is comparable to what you've already agreed to with the union. Number 3, we added with the hours of work except for the grandfathered employees on a 35-hour work week. That was an inclusion. Number 6, this one is maybe significant. We're bringing to the board, currently you have to work a year before you get any time at all. It's a buyer's market right now when it comes to employees. That has advantages. Given the economy, one of the things we're seeing is that we have access to employees who have more experience. They're older in many cases. They've maybe been accessed from a company that's left the community. They've maybe moved into the area for whatever reason. They're doing career shifting. But we are finding people coming to town to work who have an option or have been working for a period of time, have some benefits. Going an entire year without being able to take a day off is tough. Concern, well, they're brand new, what if they just suck up the time and leave? Well, they won't have to worry about it. If they start sucking up the time, we'll let them go. They're on probation for a year. It is my recommendation in our situation, and looking at our demographics and the people we've been trying to attract, and if you think through some of the employees we have, we've been able to bring some in from other organizations that bring with them a lot of skills. We've downsized. We can look at fiscal stress monitoring. They've worked well. We would propose that we would give them 1 week upon hire. Page 7.
Now you said number 6?
That would be item number 5. Page 6, if I said number of it.
Oh, page 6.
Item number 6, page 7.
That I understood.
Upon hire to personal days. Again, an entire year without the need for a personal day. I'd rather that than someone having to cough in sick so they can do something else they need to do. Discussions today, item number 8. It's the recommendation of the accounting department that at the top of, item 6, top of page 7. I'm confused. I'm mixing pages and items, sorry. Page 8.
You said page 7?
I maybe did. On page 8 now, toward the top, personal leave shall be used in a minimum of 1 hour blocks of time. It's the recommendation of the accounting office that we take that line out.
Why?
They don't really see the need to force someone to take an hour, and we are downsized quite a bit. If someone needs 15 minutes to do something, they can get to work, we want them to get to work. That was originally put in because there was a concern that maybe it was more bothersome than anything when people had to adjust payroll for 15-minute increments. But in reality, If you're going to a doctor's appointment during your lunch break and you need 15 minutes, let's give you 15 and get you back to work. So the recommendation is to take that out.
Now, it says that this has to be approved in advance. So if they're gonna go to the doctors and they take their half-hour lunch and then they're for 15 minutes, but then it goes over, which I know many doctors do.
It can happen.
Then even though it's pre-approved, then the rest of the time after that, then it's gonna get charged as personal time?
Most likely, yes. You know, it depends on the individual and the kind of time they have. If they have some comp time, they may want to use that. I'm really trying to highlight the changes for you from previous agreement. On page 11, it's a continuation, I believe, of item 9, letter F. Page 11, letter F. This is an item we bounced around a lot, and I see a potential dark side, but I support it. Letter F reads, and this would be the change, department heads, and it's only department heads. Commensurate with experience, keyword may have fewer than 20 consecutive years of full-time service. All other employees are 20 years before being eligible for health insurance upon retirement, etc. 10 years ago when I came here, it was 10. We moved it to 20. And I think that works well for us. Again, in the department head role, those are key positions. You need expertise and experience. We had one employee that we were hoping to hire in a key position, not as a department head. And because this person was coming from a position with accruals of time, because this person was not, was a little older in the workforce, facing 20 more years was a deal breaker. Not a department head. This is only department heads. If you have a person that is highly qualified to take that lead role, bringing experience, they're a veteran, and the 20 years is a killer, as a board, what this says is you have an option to reduce the 20. It doesn't say you have to. Commensurate with experience, whatever other factors, it's possible to negotiate that down, only for department heads. That's a pretty big change.
So rather than shall, it should say may?
It should say may. Department heads commensurate with experience may have fewer than 20 consecutive years. They start at 20, like everybody else, but if the board determines that is the key factor to hire a key person, you could reduce it to 18 years. I think we're seeing more and more individuals are finding they're working longer for all the obvious reasons we know. We have a younger, and that's a real concern. You get someone who works 10 years and they leave, and now we're 30 years paying healthcare benefits. It's very expensive. I can't think of too many scenarios where that would happen and you have complete control. If you sense that's the case, you don't give it to the person. We've got a couple younger people. I'll use an example, Trevor Cole, who's come in, done a commendable job. The department head, Phil Von Bargen, is his senior. Phil will most likely leave before long. Trevor, I think, would be interested in that, and I think he'd be a good candidate for that position. He's already worked 10. I mean, he will have a cumulative 20 or 30 or 40 years. It's not going to cost us. But and maybe it's psychologically as much as anything for certain people, they don't want to have to leave a pretty solid position and come here if they have to start all over. And we want quality and experience if you've got that choice. So I support it for those reasons. Thoughts, comments, questions?
Have you completed all the things that you thought were?
No, just on this item.
Oh, on this one.
And I guess for full disclosure, because Mr. Mannix can't be here, he's had a strong concern that any deviation in that could be very costly. I'm going to move on then. The other items that would be changed, or new rather, if you go to page 16, beginning with item 18, We've defined flex time. It happens, it doesn't happen, some seem to do it, some don't do it, it's all over the board. There's some value. Again, you're always looking at getting the maximum service, the maximum in the job for the minimum cost. Keep that in mind. Salaried employees is a new item. Hourly employees is a new item. Again, we're housekeeping things as much as anything, as is summer hours. Summer hours isn't, I don't think summer hours is extremely unique, but it does enable a department to have some flexibility with approval.
We've had a lot of discussions about that in terms of
Yeah.
working a longer day and being less productive.
Yeah.
And we've also,
And the
also
res-
talked about like, if they're paving and they got an extra 2 hours, they're on the road, they got all the equipment out there, it's easier to keep going.
That seems to be one of those eye of the beholder. You're absolutely right. I think the research would say productivity goes down at a certain point, but the time spent for staging, when you're out there, you want to keep going, you want to finish it. We've had people that sort of were thinking not about a 10-hour day, but about a 3-day weekend. And in certain examples, that was tried, and it didn't last, and it didn't work, because the 10-hour day is a long day, period. But that simply acknowledges there may be times, and a lot of that, we've talked with water sewer, because there are times when they could be in a project, maybe this week, we want to do 10-hour days, because we want to reduce the, staging time, tear it down, set it up, until this project is done. Then we're going back to 5/8. So that was done in my mind with the ability to flex based on the need. And it could be an accounting office. They are behind the 8 ball, they've got to get the budget out, we're gonna be burning midnight oil. Do you wanna pay overtime or straight time and do 4 10s and get it done? I mean, it's possible. This just enables that when it is appropriate to be used. Number 23 is a big new item, but there's nothing there. 23, item 23 on page 18, performance evaluation employee recognition program. We've talked about that a lot. We've been unable to come up with something. What we agreed to, though, is let's put in writing that both parties, in this instance of the employees and the town board, recognize the value of performance evaluations and employee recognition, and will strive to develop a process and an instrument that will adequately and accurately assess the performance and recognition of employees. That's an awful mouthful, but it's a step in the right direction. So that is brand new. And certification's new, but it's just a housekeeping item. The other thing, if you look at the final page 90, the signature page, which is the certification page, in the past, all of the non-union employees signed the document. We didn't really think that was necessary, and I think from their end, that can be a challenge. There has been a representative of the hourly employees and the salary. If they've agreed this is fair, they should sign off on it. It's part of the more typical negotiation process where they have a representative. Some of what's been difficult with that group is they meet as a whole, and everybody has a equal say, equal input in the decision-making, so everybody, and that's what happened, I think, initially. We had a document that was ridiculous because it had the particular interest of every single individual. And if this is, one of my last years to work, I want to make sure the senior employees get the biggest raise. And if I'm just starting, I want to make sure, it's a number versus a percentage because I'm starting smaller and so on. It just was very cumbersome. It puts a little responsibility on the groups to have a representative and for them to try and come up with something that's logical and equitable to everybody, but can't make everybody completely happy. Of course, we all sign. Any thoughts, comments about this? It's a funky kind of negotiations, but as I and our council interprets the law, we cannot discuss this in an executive session. I've met with the representatives of those groups a number of times. The last time we drafted this out was toward the end of August. I mean, it's been a while. We've been very busy, but we tried to do it without hiring somebody. I would propose this as a fair agreement. It would cover this year and next year only.
Is that when everything's due again?
We had a 2-year agreement with the unionized employees, 15 and 16, and we just didn't get anywhere, get to this point with this group yet. So this is over 12/31/16, so not too late into the coming year, which is about 3 months away. You need to start negotiating. You know, at the end of the day, it's a pretty good place to work. It's a pretty good salary, pretty good benefits, pretty good people you're working with. At the end of the day, you do some pretty important, pretty nice things. There's a far larger line for people wanting to get in here than there is trying to get out. But
Except for the higher echelons.
yeah, as employers, we want to keep a quality staff. Think about the number of lawsuits you've had. Think about the number of serious injuries we've had with equipment. That's important too, because mistakes are costly. I think this is fair. If I don't hear otherwise, I will put this to a resolution for Monday. We need to settle these people need to do. Any further comment this evening? Okay. I did have a situation surface that I do need to go into executive session on to discuss the employment history of a particular person. If I can get a motion for that purpose, I would entertain one.
So much.
Ms. LaFave, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Wood, any discussion? All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Plan on to
Aye.
active on this?
Let me give it a motion first.
Okay.
All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, and I will answer your question in a second. We're gonna go into the executive session at 7:58. I don't expect to take any action. That completes the agenda. It's a personnel issue. We will sign your papers, so you don't have to wait around while we're in the back rooms. But we will be coming back.
We also had another guest join us, and I wasn't sure if he was seeking to speak to the board or
No,
not.
I had a conflicting meeting and I was hoping to learn something about something even before you.
We talked about, come right up, Lyle, please. We talked about the, we already took a motion to go into executive session. I don't think that should be a problem for a minute. We talked about the bridge and what we could do. I shared with the board that I've contacted NYSEG, representatives I've worked with. I did so last Monday, letting them know it'll be in the work session, hoping to get some feedback from them, and I've heard nothing. So I'll follow up with them.
All right.
Oh.
I heard nothing from anyone.
Yeah.
Have you gotten any feedback from anyone?
None. And I left phone numbers with the county and with Scholar Falls. I've heard nothing from anybody with any question. So I just, like I say, I was just trying to find out what was going on.
At this point, we haven't taken any action. We want to hear what
Understood.
they're saying.
Okay, that's fine.
NYSEG is the big player.
Yeah.
And I will follow up with them. I was disappointed I didn't hear anything at all from them in the week's time,
Yes.
but I will follow up.
Okay. And I will follow up.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good night.
You too.
You guys can come over here, you can all.
Yeah, we can all sign one before you get you out of here all
So
fast.
what do you need signed?
I need this,
great.